Hello, this is RV Vagabond Jerry, and in this video I'm going to tell you about the different types of places where you can camp in your RV with the number one criteria of having electric hookups. Nothing here about dry camping or boondocking. It's all about places to camp with electric hookups. There are 10 categories I've made a list of, and I'm going to give them to you in order of my personal preference. And first, let me tell you about what criteria I use as my personal preference. Number one, of course, is electricity hookup. And there are 3 power levels: 20 amp, 30 amp, and 50 amp. Of course, I prefer 50 amp. I can do okay with 30 amp. And if my only choice is 20 amp, I can deal with that as well. My second most important criteria is a place to fill my freshwater tank. Now, most places, I would say at least 90% of these places will have a water faucet right at the campsite, but that's not required by me. If they don't have it right at the campsite, as long as there is a station where you can drive up to and fill my water tanks, that is all I need. Same thing with the dump station. That's my next one. And to fill my freshwater tank and empty my waste tanks in a dump station, I only need to do that about once every 2 weeks. So if any place to camp I'm going to give you has electric hookup only, I can usually deal with that just fine because I'll be going to other places later that have the hookups for fresh water and dump. Number 4 is a place to dump my trash, and I definitely prefer dumpsters. Some places just have waste baskets. That's kind of limited, as I may have a 2-week or more collection of trash to dump, so I prefer dumpsters. And number 5 is a clearing in the southern sky for my satellite antenna for satellite TV. And so often that is the one thing I struggle with the most: finding a campsite that doesn't have trees blocking a view of the satellite. And number 6 is to get a site where I get some good solar collection. Now, if I have electrical connection, I don't really care about the solar, unless I don't get 50 amp. If I'm getting 30 amp, or even worse, if I'm only getting 20 amp, I'm going to need that solar to power things in my RV, whereas the shore power hookup may only be used for air conditioning in the summer. So if I'm limited on the amount of electricity I have available, then I'm going to want to use my batteries to power a lot of things, maybe everything other than air conditioning. And to do that, I'm going to need to get some good solar collection. So I don't want to be around where there's a lot of trees blocking the sun. So those are the 6 things that are really important to me. Other amenities are nice, like a pool or a splash pad or a laundry room. Some have a restaurant, and some are in very nice scenery. And those things are nice, but those first 6 categories is what's important to me, and that's what I'm going to use in my list of my most favorite. Now I'm going to tell you about these 10 categories of places, starting off with my most very favorite and going down to my least favorite, and I think you will find a lot of surprises here. My number 1 most favorite place to camp with electricity is city parks. And what I like about city parks is that there are several reasons. One is that the large majority of them are free. And mind you, these are all in small towns that are doing this as a gesture to travelers to get them to stay in their little town for more than a day. And there's a few that are very reasonably priced, like $15 maybe. I'm okay with that. Another thing I like about the city parks is that it's easy setup. There's nobody there to check in with. You just pull up, hook up, turn on your television, and you're done. That's all there is to it. Now, these RV hookups they have at some city parks, they are very nice places. They're not dumps. That's not why they're free. They're very nice city parks. Many of them will have swimming pools or a splash pad and all sorts of other recreation equipment like city parks typically do. Another thing I like about the city parks is that you can arrive and hook up any time of the day. You can leave any time of the day. At other places where you have to check in with somebody, they want you to arrive no earlier than noon or 1 or 2 o'clock, and then they want you to be out of there by 11 a.m. or noon. At city parks, you come and go whenever you want. Now, the ones that are free will all have a limit as how long you can stay there, and the large majority of the places, it's 3 days. Now, camping in city parks may be something you've not even heard of, and the downside is there's not a lot of them. I have a list, actually, of at least 80 city parks around the country that do have electric hookups, and nearly all of them are free. The bad news is they're pretty much all in the central states, from Texas to North Dakota, for the most part. And in the description below this video, I'm going to give you a link to my list I have personally made of these locations of free and cheap RV parking places with electric hookups. Now, my second favorite place is casinos. And what I like about casinos is quick and easy hookup, just like at city parks, and you can come and go any time of the day. One difference between the casinos and city parks is that most casinos, probably about 3/4 of them that have these RV hookups, will want you to come in and register, so they know when people are coming and going, but they're not really strict about the hours of the day. Another nice thing is that casinos will always have a restaurant right there that you can just walk to for your meals. And another good thing about the casinos is there's no trees around. Rarely do I have to deal with trees at casinos. And again, the downside is there's very limited as to how many there are around the country. And I have those on my list as well, with the link below. And I personally found about 20 casinos around the country that do have free hookups for RVs or a cheap fee. The daily fee may range from $10 to $20. My number 3 most favorite place to RV camp with hookups is Elks Lodges. The things I like about Elks Lodges, number 1 is that it's parking lot style camping, which I actually prefer, and rarely do I have any problem with the trees. It's easy setup, just like with the city parks and casinos. However, at Elks Lodges, you're all going to pay something, and that can vary a lot from, let's say, $10 to $30 a day. They will typically be about half the price you will pay at an average RV park. And I feel good about paying money to an Elks Lodge because I know the money is going to go for support of the lodge, and if there's extra, that it goes to the various charities that they do. Because Elks Lodges are all non-profit organizations, and yes, you do have to be a member to use them. And let's say about 90% of the Elks Lodges do require you to be a member. There's some that won't, but if you do join the Elks, I have found it to be very, very beneficial, especially in large cities where it's hard to find RV parks. They often will be full and very expensive. So that's when the Elks Lodges are the most benefit, is in the large cities. And number 4 is the Corps of Engineer Parks, also known as COEs. And they are pretty much all located at lakes and rivers, which is a nice bonus to have some nice scenery around. And one typical thing about the COE parks is that you will have a very large RV space, a lot of room between the campers. I rarely have problem with trees at the COE parks, and the cost is very reasonable. They will typically be like $30 a day, but if you have a National Parks Pass, you get it at half price. So instead of paying $30, I'm paying $15. It's hard to beat that. And there are numerous COE parks all around the country. My number 5 most favorite place is fairgrounds, something else you may not have thought of. And I'm going to put a link below to a website that specializes in listing the various fairgrounds around the country that do allow people to use their RV hookups year-round. Most fairgrounds do not allow RV to use their hookups outside of the time of the fair, but there is a good number of them that do, and they do it for extra income year-round. The fairgrounds have large RV spaces, a lot of room between the campers. I rarely have any trouble with the trees, and the cost is very reasonable, vary from like $15 to $30 a day, much less than at RV parks. And number 6, I think is going to surprise you, and I kind of struggled where to put this on my list of favorites. It's at nudist resorts. And just about every single nudist resort around the country has an RV park. And of course, the number one thing I like about RV camping at nudist resorts is that you don't have to wear clothes anywhere on the property. You can walk around anywhere on the property wearing clothes if you want, not wearing any clothes at all, anything in between, and nobody cares. And let me make it clear, I don't go there to see other people naked. I go there to be able to be naked myself, which is just something very nice to do. And all of them will have a swimming pool and other recreation facilities. Nearly all of them will have a restaurant, and since they are resorts, there will be a lot of amenities. The downside is that they're very expensive, typically from $50 to $80 a day. And that's about what any luxury RV resort is going to charge, but then it's about twice as much as your average RV park. There's a lot of them around the country. I personally have been to about 10 of these over the years, mostly in California, Texas, and Florida. And because of the expense, I will go to one of these nude RV parks just maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times a year. Number 7 on my list is public campgrounds. And this includes state parks and national parks, basically any campground that is operated by a government entity. The benefits is that it's a low cost. They typically will have very wide camping spaces for each RV, and the cost is fairly low. And if you have a National Parks Pass, you go to one that is with one of the government agencies, like the COEs would be included, although they're a category of their own, then your camp fees will be half price. So they can be very low cost, and quite often they're at rivers or lakes or at the ocean. However, you're likely to find a problem with the trees. If you're like me, where having a satellite TV signal is important, or maybe to get solar, that can be a challenge. And number 8 is private campgrounds. Privately owned campgrounds, the situation there is pretty much about the same as with the public campgrounds, except they're going to be more expensive, no half-price discounts anywhere, and the RV spaces are going to be much smaller in private campgrounds than public. Number 9 on my list is RV parks. And my experience with RV parks has varied a lot. I've been to a lot of them with very varied results. The cost can vary quite a bit as well. I've been to some that are as little as $15 a night. I've been to some that are more like $50 a night. And probably about half the time I have a problem with the trees. 2 problems actually. One is with the satellite and the solar, and number 2 is driving my RV to the campsite. I find that they don't trim their trees well enough. You would think an RV park would be good about trimming the trees, but typically they are not. And as I'm driving, trying to find my campsite, I've got tree limbs hitting my roof, scraping my roof. And another problem with RV parks is that quite often, most of the large majority of the time, you'll find that the RV spacing between campers is very tight, because RV parks want to maximize the number of sites for the little bit of land that they have. So like I said, I've had very good experience at some, I've had bad experience at some. And now, number 10, my least favorite type of RV place to camp is RV resorts. These will have the most amenities. I think all of them will have a swimming pool, although if it's outside of the summer, the pool's going to be closed. And there are so many amenities that these RV resorts would have, when, like I said before, all I really care about is the top 4 items that I look for in any place to camp. And they are by far the most expensive. You're going to pay like $50, $60, $70, $80 a day. I've seen some that are upwards to $200 a day in the real luxury, high demand areas. So I don't want to pay for all that when I really only need the 4 basic necessities. And it's really amazed me, some of these RV resorts, they are really expensive, and typically they will be full. I don't care how many hundreds of spaces they have, a lot of times they will be booked full with people paying maybe $100 a night. It amazes me. And a lot of people go to these RV resorts not as just a place to camp, because they want to go out and do various things in the area that they're visiting. They go to these RV resorts to enjoy the RV resort itself. And that is just not something I typically do. So that's my list. Please let me know if you think anything else I should have included in this video about these types of places. Comment below what are your favorite and least favorite types of places to camp with the number 1 criteria of having an electrical hookup. You might want to share your experiences with other commenters on this video as well. I hope you've really gotten something out of this video. Good day, folks.